Alright, it's gonna be complicated as all hell. I have to manage like 3 different windows at once here. This probably looks like shit, honestly.
My God. I think I finally get it. This beautiful, illustrious planet wasn't made to just sit inside and do some good old wholehearted thumb twiddling. No! It was made to be nurtured and protected. To be made better every single day. I think I finally get it. I think I finally found my calling. Shit. Hey y'all, Scott here, and nature. What century is this? It totally slipped my mind that I have no sex waiting for me at home right now. The Nintendo Switch has officially launched, and it's bringing with games to play like Zelda and Menu. This is technically the first game console I ever bought at launch. Let's see how long it takes to disappoint. First, let's take a look at what comes with every Switch. On the top layer of the box, we are introduced to the left and right Joy-Con controllers, and the Nintendo Switch itself. Picking up this layer reveals the extra bits, being the HDMI cable, AC adapter, Joy-Con straps, Joy-Con grip, and the Nintendo Switch dock. Welcome to Console Overview Palooza! The Nintendo Switch console, looks-wise, is most akin to smaller 6 to 7 inch tablets such as the Amazon Fire and Nexus 7. On top of the unit is the power button, volume controls, a vent for when you're playing a system taxing round of 1-2 switch, headphone jack, and the game card slot. The back of the system includes a kickstand, and opening it up reveals the micro SD card slot for expanding storage. The kickstand is pretty weak. It'll only stay up on completely flat surfaces. Anything else like a bed, it'll just fall over. The stand does pop off, so
let's see which one I'm able to pay attention to more.
This was more than likely done to avoid the kickstand breaking off if you would have put the system in the dock with the stand out. Also, you can't charge the system while in this mode, which is unfortunate as the USB-C port is on the bottom. This could have been avoided by having the charging port on top and having a separate connector on the bottom for when placing the system in the dock. That brings us to the front of the console, which is the 6.2-inch 720p screen. This may not sound impressive in 2017, but it is the physical embodiment of good enough. It looks absolutely fine, and for video games made for the big screen TV, you don't need a Retina display. For a video game console, especially a Nintendo one, this screen looks wonderful. Coming from the Wii U gamepad and Nintendo 3DS, this is leagues better and is in line with something like the PlayStation Vita screen, and everybody loves that thing. The battery life on this sucker won't blow any minds for sure, ranging from 2 to 6 hours. Definitely plan on bringing an external power bank if you intend on playing on the go for an extended period of time. The sides of the Switch are where the Joy-Con controllers are attached, and wouldn't you know, my Switch came with them. Here we have the gray Joy-Con controllers. Either that or my color blindness is even more severe than I initially thought. The Joy-Con have a ton of tech baked into them and are some of the most versatile controllers ever conceived. The two of them together supply the player with all buttons most modern games use, but the neat thing about them is they can be used as Wii Remote and Nunchuck-like motion controllers, a standard controller, or used on their side as 2 separate controllers. For 2-player games on the go, this is super convenient as you can just bring the Switch with Joy-Con attached and you'll have everything you'll need for multiplayer. However, this setup isn't the most ideal in the world. The shoulder buttons in this mode are awful. They are super recessed and you have to really dig in to press them. Thankfully, the Joy-Con straps alleviate this problem by adding more height to the shoulder buttons, while also adding a strap for more secure motion control. It's nice that there's a way to better the shoulder buttons, but I feel that the Joy-Con 2-player mode was primarily made with tabletop mode on the go in mind. Like, are you really going to bring your Nintendo Switch and Joy-Con straps along with you to places? If anything, you just bring the Switch and rough it out with the lame shoulder buttons. However, if the Joy-Con are all you have at home for 2-player games, they work fine, and actually are much better than you think. Even the right Joy-Con with the stick in the middle feels fine, it's just that these are more of an in-a-pinch configuration rather than an ideal one. The Joy-Con can be attached to the Joy-Con grip for a much more standard controller feel, and I gotta say, it does feel pretty solid. One potential issue pertaining to the Joy-Con and the grip is that the controller must be connected to the console to be charged. The Joy-Con grip that comes bundled with the console cannot charge them, so for that you're going to have to buy a separate Joy-Con grip for that functionality.
Oh, I'm gonna go get
I originally thought that this was way past dumb, but the Joy-Con have a battery life of 20 hours each. That means you're definitely not going to run out of juice during a normal play session as long as you connect the Joy-Con back to the console once you're done playing. And if you do play for 20 hours straight, you can always attach the controllers to the console and play in handheld mode for 2 hours before the system dies, and spend the last 2 hours of the day looking in the mirror asking yourself where it all went wrong. And by then, the controllers should be sufficiently charged enough to play some more, so on paper this seems to be a problem, but in use I don't really see it being too big of an issue at all, really. One of the big features touted by the Joy-Con is HD Rumble. This enhanced version of controller vibration can replicate the feeling of action, such as balls moving around or ice cubes being put into a glass. In theory, it's pretty cool. In reality, it still is. It's just that I don't think it would fool anybody. 1-2 Switch's ball count minigame is the example I'm going to use because debatedly it's the best use so far, and it does a good job emulating what balls in the controller would feel like, but you can still tell it's just vibrations. Still cool and well done, it's just still obviously rumble. The bottom right of the Joy-Con controller has an IR camera that can detect different shapes and motions, and that's alright I guess. And the left Joy-Con houses a capture button to take screenshots in-game and eventually via a software update record video. This feature is ungodly quick and makes it crazy easy to just take pictures of whatever you're doing. The overall button and stick feel of the Joy-Con is pretty good, definitely more in line with the feeling of a 3DS than a Wii U as the buttons feel small and clicky. The sticks are also pretty small and don't have a huge degree of movement. However, for use on the go, these work fine. The buttons on the right Joy-Con are a tad bit too close to the bottom stick for my liking. I would have preferred a bit more wiggle room on the controllers to be honest. But overall,
That's some goldfish.
I do like the Joy-Con. It
Should be good for a little while.
Sliding them into the system and grip are spookingly satisfying and were the primary way I played my Switch. But everything changed once my Pro controller shipped. This is the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. You see, I like the Joy-Con grip, but I love the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Everything about this controller feels wonderful. The buttons are all large and feel great. The sticks feel fluid and have a greater range than the Joy-Con, or at least it feels like it. And just the overall feel, texture, and shape of the controller makes it just ooze into my hands. It also supports HD Rumble, Amiibo, and includes a gyroscope, meaning that a bigger variety of games can support it compared to the Wii U and its Pro controller. The only problem is that this sucker is $70. Listen, I have no complaints with this guy, but the Joy-Con grip works well enough so you don't need the Pro controller. It's awesome, but a little too pricey to call it a must-buy. However, if you vastly prefer the feel of a console controller to handheld controls, definitely consider the Pro controller. However, one glaring issue I have with all controllers is the lack of a power button. You can't turn this thing on from your controllers, which was something the Wii was able to do. Kind of lame. Finally, let's cover the dock, which will be your gateway onto the TV. The back of the dock has this pretty neat compartment you open up to access the AC adapter,
Mine broke
HDMI,
off.
and a USB port, meaning this leaves room for some pretty slick cable management. On the front, we also have two other USB ports, and that's really it. This thing is pretty small, and while you have to put it on the top of your entertainment center to slide the Switch in, it also won't take up too much room. Putting the Switch in is super slick and easy. Rarely do I ever have to jiggle the console around to find the connector. It usually finds its way in there itself. Swapping between console mode and handheld mode is basically instant, meaning you can juggle between the two with ease. Or you can keep the Switch in the dock forever, or you can never use the dock at all. However, I think this is a poor use of resources. Me personally, if I didn't use the dock, I'd use it to hold all my excess napkins. Overall, the design of everything here looks great. Nintendo finally decided to ditch the glossy Fisher-Price designs and went for a more modern approach. Everything looks clean and elegant while also looking completely usable and comfortable. Mostly. Moving on to software, the Switch's OS is super quick, responsive, and snappy. It has a lot of smart features in it like smart device communication, but a lot that's missing in questionable inclusions. Friend code's got their groove back, everybody, and it's one of the biggest upsets of 2017 so far. Why are we here after the Wii U established a username system? Why doesn't the Switch save my credit card info on the eShop?
Are you kidding me?
Why is there no web browser or video apps? This is basically a tablet. It would be nice to have some basic tablet functions on the thing. Sadly, the Switch is pretty barren at launch in terms of applications. It's simply a games device right
chased
now.
me.
Of course, games are why you'd buy the thing, and let's be honest, if you have a Switch at launch, you already have a device to browse the web and watch Netflix on. It's just, those feel like they should come standard with a new system in 2017. It's not a huge deal, but it is manageable and quite
Welcome to the stream.
I like the feel of the OS, but this screams rush, not in terms of quality, but quantity. It just feels like Nintendo did the bare minimum here and shipped it out. Hopefully we get a steady stream of updates, and in a year's time, this won't be an issue. On the other side of software, the launch lineup here definitely exists, I'll give it that. But to be fair, on paper, while this isn't the best launch out there, let's be honest, no launches are. The PS4 launched with around 75% multi-platform games available on last generation hardware,
Forget
and
where
most
captions
next-gen
are.
PS4 exclusive games reeked. Launches don't define a console, but I do say having Zelda here is a major bonus. Yeah, this game is on Wii U, but 4 people own that thing, so who cares? If only my copy of Zelda came shipped with the console, but don't worry, it's expected to come anytime now. It may not be a lot, but I feel that there's a good amount of variety here. Games like 1-2 Switch, Just Dance 2017, and Skylanders Imaginators are great family pleasers. Shovel Knight and Fast RMX are pretty stellar indie games. And then there are games like Snipper Clip, Super Bomberman R, and of course Zelda, which really appeal to Nintendo fans, and in Zelda's case, the hardcore gamer. It's just that a lot of these games are available elsewhere. There's not a ton of exclusive content you can't play anywhere else. Seeing how Shovel Knight, Skylanders,
no, it's a
Imaginators,
different
and
stream
Just
this
Dance
time.
2017 are basically playable on air at this point makes the fact that they're on Switch not the most enticing thing in the world. In terms of how the games look, the Switch seems to be in between a Wii U and Xbox One in terms of power, which is fine because remember, this is the system. This is just a tablet and it can run games like Breath of the Wild, Skyrim, Mario Kart 8. It's pretty nuts. Even if a current-gen game makes its way to the Switch and doesn't look as good as the PS4 version, the Switch version already has a pro to it, that being it's portable. I think many will look past graphical inferiority in favor of portability. By the way, check out these game boxes. These things look great. Also, the game cartridge screams, "I'm wasting plastic and taste test worthy." When you get your Switch, give it a try, champ. But like I said, launches don't define a console, and there's already a lot of upcoming releases in March alone. Nintendo has detailed their lineup for the rest of the year, and so far looks stellar. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, Splatoon 2, Super Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Fire Emblem Warriors, and more that just haven't
Honestly, I
been
forgot that
revealed
Xenoblade
yet.
Chronicles
It's a
2
good time to
even
be a Nintendo
released.
fan. Is the Switch perfect? Obviously not, but it's a pretty neat piece of hardware that a ton of people
Drift.
are currently loving.
The
or
Joy-Con
enjoying,
drift is...
which is something the Wii U
Oof.
just didn't do. So far, the Switch shows promise. Promise to be something amazing by next year or year's end. I wanted to look at the Switch right now and also the potential it has in the future. Right now, I like it. The hardware has a lot going for it, and the gimmick this time around actually resonates with people, and won't completely cripple a game like the Gamepad did with Star Fox Zero or Paper Mario Color Splash, for example. My main complaints lie within the shortcomings in every mode, with handheld mode's battery life being subpar at best, console mode not having things like a power button on controllers, and games like Zelda running better on the handheld, and tabletop mode having a lame kickstand and the Joy-Con on their sides having even lamer shoulder buttons. Not to mention the OS is ungodly limited.
Why?
But the Switch has a stellar lineup coming up, and
You can't
for a
shoot
game
me yet. I
console,
don't have my
I
HEV
think
suit.
that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter how powerful the system is, as long as it has games I want to play, I don't really care.
Thusly, if I have to give the Nintendo Switch a score, I'll give it a solid 4.5 out of 6. And hey, Zelda Breath of the Wild finally came in, so I can finally open this box up and talk about what an amazing game it is on the Nintendo Switch.
Damn! Console Wars.
Hey y'all, Scott here. Woo! Sorry about that. It's just, we're talking wars today. And I know what you're thinking, so I'll stop you right there. No, we're not talking about the Lebanese Civil War or the Yom Kippur War. We're talking console wars. A new console for subsequently Melissa's launched recently, and many have discussed where it may fit within the current console race. But before we delve into that discussion, let's talk about console races of generations past.
The first generation of cartridge-based console wars was a crowded one. There were a handful of competitors in the market ranging from the Odyssey 2 to the Vectrex, but the main three most will remember was the Atari 2600, Intellivision, and the ColecoVision. The Atari 2600 reigned supreme mainly due to the big name games that appeared on it. Atari garnered most of the top arcade games on the console with hits like Space Invaders, Pong, Missile Command, Centipede, Asteroids, and Pac-Man. These titles weren't the best versions of said games, but they were close enough to make the Atari 2600 a better buy for most consumers. The Intellivision sold decently, selling around 3 million units, but didn't have as many big-name games on it as the 2600. Mattel positioned the Intellivision as a console for the more mature audiences, focusing on more complicated controls and sports games. Mattel pushed hardware more than software with multiple peripherals and console revisions, so it failed to really pose much of a threat to Atari and faded away once the video game crash of 1983 came along. The ColecoVision's game library consisted of a lot of the hidden gem arcade games that weren't on the 2600, and they even got the license to make and pack in Donkey Kong with the console. However, it came out too close to the video game crash of 1983, thus it didn't have enough time to put much of a dent in Atari's install base or garner much of a market of its own, selling around 2 million units. Nintendo came to the burning building known as the video game industry in America and put it out with a little thing called the Nintendo Entertainment System. The main competitors it had during this generation were the Atari 7800 and the Sega Master System. The Atari 7800 flopped pretty hard in comparison to the NES for a couple of reasons. The power of the system was years behind, as it was originally stated to release in 1984, but was shelved due to the disinterest in video games at the time. Also, the games on the platform were mainly in line with the titles released on the Atari 2600, with the majority being arcade games. doesn't look as good when you're being compared to massive games at the time, such as The Legend of Zelda or Super Mario Bros. The Sega Master System was a great success in European territories, and especially Brazil. However, outside of Europe and Brazil, the Master System failed to achieve an audience. Marketing was pretty poor, and the game library just didn't hold a candle to the NES's. This was due to a lack of third parties on the Master System, as Nintendo basically held a monopoly on the video game industry, forcing third parties to contractually obligate to only make games for Nintendo platforms. With this, Nintendo was basically unstoppable this generation, with Atari and Sega together not even selling half of the NES's 61 million units sold. One of the most infamous console wars to ever transpire was the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Sega developed the Genesis as a competitor with the original NES, releasing in 1989. Sega mainly focused on more hardcore, mature titles, such as sports games and arcade-quality ports. Sega's marketing tagline was "Sega does what Nintendo," and they hammered in how Nintendo was for little kids and Sega was for the older ones. Nintendo fired back by releasing the Super Nintendo. It was superior to the Genesis in almost every way, except for the speed of the CPU. Sega used this to their advantage by marketing that their console had blast processing while the SNES didn't. This was a bunch of marketing fluff, and blast processing doesn't actually mean diddles. Nintendo and Sega kept on pumping out game after game trying to one-up each other. The problem Sega ran into, however, was that they freaked out over specs and decided to release hardware add-ons to increase the power of the Genesis. These add-ons turned out to be the infamous Sega CD and Sega 32X. This made the Genesis seem weak in comparison to the Super Nintendo, as it felt like Sega had to overcompensate for the weak power of the Genesis. It didn't help that these two add-ons really didn't add much to the console other than a headache. Neither had a ton of standout titles and really just made it easier for Nintendo to fire back at Sega.
Oof, we won't get to any
When
Gex
Donkey Kong
for a
Country
long
came out,
time, I don't
Nintendo
think.
specifically highlighted the pre-rendered 3D graphics, as they said you wouldn't need a 32-bit or CD add-on for the game. In the end, while it was a tight race, the Super Nintendo beat out the Genesis, selling 49 million compared to 30 to 36 million. Different numbers are thrown around.
I'm gonna get a Gatorade now.
The major three-way war this time around was PlayStation versus Nintendo 64 versus Sega Saturn. Nintendo originally partnered with Sony to create a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. However, after looking through their contract with Sony, Nintendo realized they would barely be making any money off of the software created for the add-on, as that would all go to Sony. Nintendo retaliated by partnering with Philips instead for the add-on that was never released, leaving Sony embarrassed and burned. Thus, Sony took the experience they accumulated while working on the SNES CD to create their own platform, the PlayStation. They were able to make an affordable CD-based game system with a good amount of titles. When Nintendo
I got 3.
realized that the Nintendo 64 would use cartridges, that's when most third parties went to Sony. Because the
Just in
CD
case.
holds so much more information than a cartridge. Nintendo classic franchises such as Castlevania, Mega Man, and Final Fantasy had their games mainly on PlayStation this generation. Sony garnered almost all of the third-party support, which on top of a good amount of quality first-party offerings, an aggressive marketing campaign, and an affordable price, allowed the PlayStation to dominate the 5th generation with over a staggering 100 million units sold. The Nintendo 64 came in a distant second with only around 32 million sold. And
Damn.
that leaves the Sega Saturn. Sega peeved off a ton of retailers by botching the launch of the Saturn, issuing a surprise launch, basically saying, "And the Saturn's in stores now," rather than giving enough prep time. Thus, some retailers flat out refused to carry the Saturn. The system was also difficult to develop for, and because of that, and the already low sales, lacked third-party support. I wonder who won this sucker. Dreamcast versus PlayStation 2 versus Xbox versus GameCube. The Dreamcast actually had a good launch and sold very well at the start, but momentum was murdered because of the impending launch of Sony's PlayStation 2. Think about it. Sony is making a sequel to the platform which sold over 100 million units. And this one played DVDs during a time
There
when
it is.
DVD players were expensive and not very common to have. Now it came standard with this new game system. That's a no-brainer to buy. The PlayStation 2 absolutely slugged the Dreamcast into at least 4 different graves, and dominated in sales compared to the Xbox and the GameCube. With the Xbox, that platform had a lot going for it in comparison to the PlayStation 2. Most multi-platform games actually looked better on the Xbox and had extra features. The system could play DVDs, though required a DVD remote accessory, but I think the main reason it failed to beat the PS2 was brand recognition. Nobody knew what the Xbox was, so it was more viable to go with the PlayStation 2. And Nintendo decided to focus on drooling instead of making educated business decisions, and went with mini DVDs as the GameCube's disc format instead of actual DVDs. This meant not only the GameCube couldn't play movies, but also had a hard time fitting a fair amount of multi-platform games on a disc, so third-party support just wasn't as good as the PlayStation 2s or the Xboxes.
Alright.
Nintendo got relatively hungry for corporate flesh and decided to release the Wii, which focused not on horsepower, but a different way to play with the Wii remote. Some gamers were excited for the Wii, but it really struck a chord with the casual audience, or the normies. Stock was limited, so that added to the craze, making people buy the thing immediately if they saw it on store shelves, even if they didn't want it. Nintendo was sitting pretty this generation, but this momentum didn't last, and in the end, kinda hurt them as they made some dumb decisions with their next console. It's pretty obvious Nintendo won this generation, but how did the PS3 and Xbox 360 war turn out? Sony got way past smug with the PS3. After winning the past two generations, Sony believed they could make a ludicrously expensive console that's ridiculously difficult to develop for, and people would eat it up. I guess Sony thought by making PS3's architecture foreign, developers would spend all their time developing for their system so they wouldn't have time to develop for the Xbox 360 or the Wii. That obviously never happened. With an insane price and not a lot of great games, the PS3 failed to take off immediately, and people mainly went with the Xbox 360 instead. It was cheaper, had better online, and all the third-party support, with some first-party games like Halo. Most people were more than okay with going with the 360 instead of the PS3. However, this started to switch around near the middle of the gen. Sony flipped on their attitude, completely rebranding the PS3 with a new design that was leagues cheaper, and a new focus rather than media playback on the console, good games. Sony started pumping out game after game for the platform, and the PS3 garnered a stellar library by the end of its life. Microsoft started to focus on things like multimedia features and connect with the 360, and Sony just started to look better and better to some gamers. In the end, they were pretty neck and neck, both selling around 84 million units. And now we come to the current console race. PS4 versus Xbox One versus Wii U versus Nintendo Switch. The Wii U was announced first in 2011 and really didn't wow anybody over other than some Nintendo fans. At a less than stellar price point with little third-party support and a gimmick that just failed to capture anybody's attention, the Wii U failed, and it failed hard. Selling around 14 million units, it's pretty obvious why Nintendo released a new console this year. The PS4 has been the king of this generation so far, and it's pretty easy to see why. The Xbox One was absolutely creamed when it was announced due to all the bad press surrounding it. It can play used games. It always requires to be online. It's $500. It looks like a VCR. It's really only a TV watching Call of Duty playing machine. Sony focused on games with the PS4's reveal and marketing, and when Sony revealed that the PS4 wouldn't be forcing online all the time, locking out used games, and would be cheaper than the launch price of the Xbox One, it was pretty much done right there. However, Microsoft has been doing a wonderful job spinning the story around on the Xbox One recently. They've been solely focusing on games nowadays, with things like backwards compatibility and Xbox Game Pass. The Xbox One S is a great piece of hardware that looks at least a solid 12 times better than the original Xbox One. The PS4 will win this generation in my opinion, but I think the Xbox One is doing enough right that it may be a close one when all is said and done. But what about the Nintendo Switch? Well, I think it will sell relatively well. It does have a purpose in this console race and has a major advantage compared to the Xbox One and PS4, that being portability. That is something the Wii U didn't have, and I think it's nice to have a console that's actually incredibly different from the norm. It shakes things up and keeps everything fresh. Will it outsell the PS4? No, but I think it and the other two consoles in this race will do well, and that's healthy for the industry.
Console wars are definitely one of the most interesting aspects of console generations. Sometimes the most powerful hardware wins, sometimes the most inept one does, and of course console wars encourage competition, which is good for the industry and us, the consumers. So it doesn't matter who wins this console generation, because we've gotten and will continue to get stellar titles from all the big three. But don't take my word for it. That's why we're going to be looking at a reporter on the field, Reporty Jim, who is currently reporting on the console war grounds. How's it looking down there, Reporty Jim?
He's dead.
I need to stop sending people to cover wars.
Alright, next video, physical versus digital games.
Hey y'all, Scott here. Listen,
Yep.
I hate things, and that includes clutter. Clutter scares the piss out of me, and I'm ready to get it out of my life ASAP and quickly. Jesus! You see, this is what I'm talking about. The whole concrete matter thing has been a fad for eons, and I'm ready to call it quits. I I'm strictly living an all-digital lifestyle from this moment forward. I recently got rid of all my paper, and I'm currently in the process of converting all my movies, music, photos, clothes, water, trees, and documents to a hard drive. And this digitalization of my life extends to my video game collection as well. Just the mere thought of owning all these games physically makes me want to give myself a good old fist shaking. It's amazing what it will be like when I own all these games digitally. Convenience alert. And to think I used to do this.
Yes. Yes. Roll onto the track. Yes. Jeez, that is loud.
Jesus, no! What do I look like? Somebody who has time?
Yeah,
That was
it's
the old me.
really loud.
New me only buys games digitally from now on. After getting rid of all unneeded physical items, I can now definitively say, this is what I'm talking about.
Alright, so let me start the digital renaissance. What game will I download first? Well, I love Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, so I'm gonna want to play that again. Alright, $29.99 is definitely a bit steep for a game I bought physically for $20 2 years ago, and that I can still buy physically for $20 or less. Alright, well maybe I should wait until I see a game I can get for the same price I bought for it physically, or maybe even cheaper. In the meantime, I can play these games I downloaded on PlayStation Plus. Well, I have a hankering for Super Meat Boy. Oh well, that's a hearty dose of disappointing. I don't own these games. I can only play them while my PS Plus membership is active. Totally whatever. It doesn't matter that my hard drive is basically full and I can't get games for cheaper digitally. What I can do is sign up for a streaming service, that being PlayStation Now. I signed up for a free trial a while back and it worked decently well. Back then, most of the games had different pricing, and a game like Deus Ex Human Revolution would cost $30 to rent for 90 days, while you could go out and buy a retail copy for $5 used. Now, if you excuse me before I reenact what checking the prices of PlayStation Now was like back in 2015, I need to take a hearty gulp out of my hourly bottle of water. God, that's such tart water. And what gross prices? Now the service is much like Netflix, as you pay an annual fee and you get access to hundreds of games. Much better in my opinion, but let's be honest here, streaming doesn't play well with a lot of games. I originally played Pac-Man Championship Edition DX on the service, and it's really unenjoyable through streaming. The game requires pretty quick reactions, but with an online connection being required, that brings lag into play, and it ends up kind of ruining the game. Digital games have recently disappointed almost every organ in my body, which is unfortunate. The prices are generally higher than physical games. The storage space on these consoles are limited, and even if you buy an external hard drive, you can't really put that many games on it. Even a 2 terabyte hard drive will fill up eventually because new games are so big. You can't even trade in the games, and you don't even technically own the games. You have a license to run the software, but you don't own it like you do with a physical copy of a game. You can do whatever you want after you buy it. That's not to say you're wrong if you like digital games. The convenience factor is definitely there. It's just, in my opinion, I just see much more benefits to owning physical games. But we haven't tested out one more factor: download speed. So, we're going to purchase Uncharted the Nathan Drake Collection on the PlayStation Store, see how long it takes to download, and we're going to go to GameStop and buy the exact same game there and bring it back home and see which one takes longer.
Hey guys, don't mind me, just a member of the Economic Stimulation Squad here. Well, the download was faster than buying the game physically, and I can totally assure you that I am completely alive inside.
Loading zone. Oh wow, that was fast. Look back at the Nintendo 3DS.
Hey all, Scott here. Don't mind me, just wearing my nostalgia goggles here. These things are a bitch, I have no idea why people wear these. The 3DS is officially 6 years old, which means it has to go through what every 6-year-old has to experience at some point, being yelled at for existing. So, I thought it'd be fun to look back at my personal experiences with the system ever since 2011.
I originally bought the 3DS the exact day it received a price cut. It retailed for 250 bones for the first few months, but that obviously wasn't achieving the sales Nintendo was yearning for. Personally, I think the lackluster sales had to do more so with the lack of compelling games, but hey, it's whatever. I picked up the Cosmo Black color, with the other option being Aqua Blue, and man, this sure was a design. It was a galactic slice of cake. I always found the sparkles a bit weird, and the bottom screen and circle pad would leave an imprint on the top. The start and select and home buttons all feel like you're killing an ant when you press down on them, and the stylus is on the top of the system for some godforsaken reason. But overall, the main complaint people had with this system when it came out was the lack of a second circle pad, probably just because the PS Vita had one and everybody thought it was going to be the death of the 3DS. Nintendo later released the Circle Pad Pro, but they didn't use this thing that much at all. A few games here and there supported it, but overall it was just kind of a way for Nintendo to shut everybody up about the 3DS not having a second stick. This version is for the 3DS XL, which, hey, we might as well talk about the system variants. After the original, Nintendo released the 3DS XL in 2012. It improved almost everything about the original, but I don't know, it always felt a little cheaper, and like they were specifically trying to cut costs. I still vastly preferred it, but it definitely didn't feel that premium compared to the original. In 2013, incompetency took the form of an end piece of bread with the 2DS. This was revealed around August, and people flipped piss. But overall, it turned out to be a nice gateway into the fun and incredibly endearing world of being a Nintendo fan. In 2014 in Japan and 2015 here, the new 3DS and new 3DS XL came out and basically answered all complaints people had with previous pieces of 3DS hardware. It included super stable 3D that tracked your eyes, better design, and a free nipple included with every purchase. I only picked up the standard new 3DS within the past year just because I love this design, but I do say I definitely miss the bigger screens of the XL. Before we delve into games, let's talk about the main gimmick of the 3DS, the 3D. Honestly, it was really cool at first. That startup screen was what I used to show people what glasses-free 3D was like. Still probably the best use of 3D on the system. Over time, however, the 3D slider more consistently went down. It just kind of forced you to play the way the system wanted you to play, like sitting at a different angle to view the 3D, even with the new 3DS models. I more so keep it off for comfort reasons, just so I can sit how I please and play how I wish. The first games I got for the 3DS were Pilot Wings Resort and Asphalt 3D. I really wanted Pilot Wings because it was basically an expansion on the piloting minigame in Wii Sports Resort. Upon playing the game, I concluded that it was a piloting minigame in Wii Sports Resort, but expanded upon. I picked up Asphalt 3D because it was the cheapest 3DS game at GameStop when I was buying Pilot Wings, so I decided to give it a go. Upon playing the game, I realized it was the cheapest 3DS game at GameStop at the time. You know all those cheap iPhone racing games that you play for like 5 minutes and delete? That's Asphalt 3D, but it's on an actual game console, so it feels even more cheap and soulless. Over the next few months, the 3DS
I used to have an Asphalt game on the
I
phone.
would download a lot of Game Boy games.
I think it was Adrenaline.
Enjoy a fair amount of them.
I haven't. I was going to try it, but I figured this was what I wanted to do.
Super Mario Land kind of blows, but it's a Mario game, so it's
But
amazing.
I'll
whatever.
probably do
Really,
it
though, it's a fun little
2
game.
days because I'm getting my
Really
wisdom
sets
teeth
the
removed
time,
tomorrow,
no
so that's gonna be
siree.
fun.
Over the lifespan of the system, I
Definitely
played
not gonna stream
classics
none.
such as Super Mario Land 2, Mega Man, Dr. Wily's Revenge, Mario's Picross, and a handful of others. I also continually downloaded 3D classics like Xevious, Kirby's Adventure, and it was only around the time I bought 3D Classics Urban Champion that I realized I was a complete tool. Sega continually released a bunch of classic games under their own 3D Classics moniker, which was pretty neat too. NES, Game Gear, and Game Boy Color games also appeared on the eShop, which was nice, but I think I, including many others, were just dying to see GBA support. 10 GBA games were made available on the 3DS, but only to people who bought the system before the first major price cut. But I remember Nintendo continually saying they couldn't get GBA emulation right on the 3DS, so that's why they never did GBA Virtual Console, and I was always like, what? SNES games came recently last year exclusively for the new 3DS system, but this was a bit too little too late for me, as I just failed to really care. When the holidays rolled around and right before Christmas, I picked up Mario Kart 7. It's a solid version of Mario Kart, definitely. However, I always felt that the biggest problem with it was the lack of single-player content, especially coming after Mario Kart DS with the mission mode and all.
Yeah.
After the holidays, I used my Christmas money to pick up a few games, one of those being Super Mario 3D Land, also referred to as the savior of the 3DS. This game plus Mario Kart were big factors in the 3DS's thrust back into success, and for good reason. Looking back at this Mario game, while it's not very original and does very little new itself, its use of 3D, superb level design, and controls made this an awesome handheld entry in the Mario franchise. I played this game so much, I even played through the entire game to completion without dying once, which equates to quitting out to the home menu every time I died. Speaking of Mario games, potentially the most controversial game on the system was Paper Mario Sticker Star, also referred to as I played through the first hour or so of this game, and it was alright. However, after that, I never really played through this game again. Now, with Color Splash, that game was actually good enough for me to want to play through it to the end, but Sticker Star didn't really grab me, and I don't think anybody's going to pout because I said that. This generation served as a lot of 2D platformers. Maybe too many. Actually, yeah, too many. But the 3DS had a ton of solid ones. The 3DS was the system I beat Donkey Kong Country Returns on. I always found it surprising that Donkey Kong never received an original outing on the 3DS. Like, for God's sakes, Metroid got an original 3DS game, and it was trash. With DKC Returns 3D, of course you're trading silky smooth graphics of the Wii version for purely button control and extra content, and I personally believe it's a fair trade-off, and in many respects the 3DS version is superior. The two Kirby games on the 3DS were excellent. However, Planet Robobot was the superior one. Triple Deluxe felt a little too generic Kirby in comparison, and while it was good, Planet Robobot just had so much more going on.
Oh, that's right.
You can't talk 2D platformers without bringing up New Super Mario Bros. 2.
Honestly, I remember going to GameStop with my brother and seeing Planet Robobot on the shop, and I was like, wait, they released a new Kirby game? Because this was before a time where I really kept track of like Nintendo Directs and stuff like that.
There was no point to all the coins. There was no shot to summon them in. There was no unlocks based on how many coins you obtained. There was nothing. But based on the fact that I wasn't getting way past late in my freshman year of high school, I did get 1 million coins in the game, mainly due in part to the DLC Coin Rush packs I got. One pack being advertised as a coin-nado, to put it lightly. It was still a good game, however, nothing breathtaking by any means. But you want to talk about nothing breathtaking or surprising by any means, Yoshi's New Island. Good God, I did not care for this game. And this is coming from the kid who mocked up a 3DS XL for the game, and it got covered by major gaming news outlets. Thanks, guys, I'm still blushing to this very day, but Jesus Christ, this game blows. It's so easy and boring, and the graphics just don't work most of the time, and the music sounds like it's composed with wet sneakers. I wasn't a fan. And you want to talk about cartridge-shaped garbage, take a gander at Chibi Robo Ziplash.
This game
It blows.
Alright, whatever. I didn't like
The start of a joke.
But the majority of them were pretty good to pretty great.
That
But
turned
the
into a
puzzles are also
story.
pretty banging, and the 3DS had some wonderful puzzle games. The most memorable for me was Pushmo, and man, it was a game. It even had graphics and sound, and it's on the 3DS too. I was in heaven. This was a great little puzzle game, and the series has had multiple entries both on the 3DS and Wii U. I genuinely hope it continues on the Switch. There were also a few Mario vs. Donkey Kong games on the eShop. Oh, I'm sorry, Mario and Donkey Kong. This was a different take on the formula and brought the series into 3D, and this was way more interesting and fun than the 2D versions. Professor Layton had a few fun entries on the 3DS, but in terms of traditional puzzle games like Tetris, we had Tetris Access, which I didn't really get into. Yeah, I don't know, it was just generic Tetris, nothing really that special. Puzzle and Dragon Z plus Puzzle and Dragon Super Mario Bros. Edition. It's a decent package, but I personally didn't really get into it. As a fun little distraction, there was Ultimate NES Remix, the same NES Remix Nintendo said couldn't run on the 3DS. This port was mainly the best-of compilation of the first two games on Wii U, and the game works leagues better on a handheld, but it feels mostly like a cheap port as it doesn't include 3D and doesn't have much in terms of 3DS exclusive content. In terms of simulation-type games, I played Animal Crossing New Leaf and Tomodachi Life. It's a bit weird because I can say without hesitation New Leaf was a better game, but I enjoyed Tomodachi Life considerably more. I don't know why, but it doesn't matter as Tomodachi Life got lame after a week, so I hope a new one comes out for the Switch with a metric 4 more loaves of content. Animal Crossing got a spin-off on the 3DS in the form of Happy Home Designer, but I actually haven't played it. The 3DS had so many Zelda games in the form of remakes,
And
ports, new
boom.
games. It was pretty crazy. The main one I played here was A Link Between Worlds, and it's pretty fun to look back and see major ideas Breath of Wild uses starting in this game, like the non-linearity and basically having all the items from the get-go. Now, I really liked every Zelda game I've played, but I never finished them, just because I play them for a while, set them down, come back a few days later, and I'm completely lost. This changed with Breath of the Wild as I actually beat the game, but for me, somebody who can't handle the traditional Zelda gameplay may be more down for Triforce Heroes. It was okay, but they really made it exclusively for multiplayer. Playing single player isn't fun and emphasizes loneliness. Finally, we have to talk about Smash Brothers. This was when the 3DS peaked in my opinion, as the majority of games that came after it really didn't appeal to me. 2015 and 2016 were just filled with RPGs and poor quality titles, and I'm not necessarily a fan of either. Smash ran beautifully on the system, which was jaw-dropping in many cases. I always wanted a portable Smash Brothers ever since I played Brawl back in 2008, and I have to say, Smash 3DS didn't disappoint. One of the crowning achievements of the 3DS, though, was the eShop. So much variety and so many games. I already talked about the Virtual Console, but I want to reiterate how cool it was to see Game Boy games back in action. In my opinion, a ton of Game Boy games are more often forgotten than NES and SNES games, so it was great to have all of these on one system. Plus, you could change the color from black and white to puke green, and oh boy, what a touch! In terms of eShop games, Colors 3D was a fun 3D painting program that I used here and there, and Burn Mania 3D was a hilarious joke until we all realized it was real. Harmonite was a super fun rhythm game by Game Freak, and Kersploosh was one of the cheapest games Nintendo put out on the eShop price-wise, and it was an arcade rock faller and one of the finest of its kind. You could download trailers for upcoming games and view them in 3D, which I had a fondness for. I love keeping these trailers on my system just because a lot of these showcase these games early in development. Back when Mario Tennis Open, Sticker Star, and A Link Between Worlds were just referred to as the franchise names and logos were different. Also, this thing plays DS games. The 3DS was truly one of the most bang-for-your-buck systems out there. And while not all my memories linked to it were positive, I had a ton of fun with this system over the past 6 years.
The 3DS has lived an incredibly full life, but I'm glad Nintendo decided to kill it off. That means all of their development efforts can go towards the Switch, and that means we get more games for the Switch.
Alright, next video of Breath of the Wild is perfect.
Hey y'all, Scott here, and I have to say, I'm pretty tired of the whole having a reputation thing, so I decided to upload a video of me eating cereal to a pornographic website. I'm not a fan of having an image and a good one at that, so let's kill all remaining reputation I have after the whole
I wonder if I can get
by talking about how
my channel deleted because of that.
And why I'm rooting for leprosy, because I'm that evil of a human being.
First off, let's set a few things straight. I have never beaten a Zelda game until Breath of the Wild. I know, I'm one of those fake fans. Listen, I've played a ton of Zelda games and greatly enjoyed them all. I just never got around to beating them. I know, I can smell my guilt too, and it is poignant. But now that I beat Breath of the Wild, who knows, maybe I can beat all the Zelda games and make some killer and overhyped Scott The Woz episodes about them. Maybe someday. But as you all probably assumed, I'm going to be talking about a few issues Breath of the Wild has. These issues can range from actual flaws to minor nitpicks, but regardless, these are the things...
Why does this mic sound so shitty?
Spoilers. One of the easier flaws to point out is the voice acting. It's not that it's bad, it's just painfully mediocre. The voice actors aren't horrible, but it feels that Nintendo just gave them a script for the first time and used their first take reading it, giving them no context of the scene they were reading for.
I owe you big for this. Because of you, my spirit is finally free. Can't thank you enough.
Almost all characters have a weird variance in tone throughout one sentence. A lot of the times, they make weird pauses or don't pause at all where they should have. Also, I always felt that people wanted voice acting in Zelda to combat the 60 acres of text one would have to read in each game. There is still a lot of text in this game that isn't voice acted, and voice acting is only really in important cutscenes, and it doesn't even really last that awfully long. Like I said, the voice actors do the job and get decent enough voice acting in a Zelda game, but man, it could have been so much better. I really do quite like the shrines in Breath of the Wild. They house nice little bite-sized dungeons with excellent puzzles that have 1 to 3 steps involved. Spirit orbs obtained from them can be exchanged for heart containers or more stamina, which makes finding and completing the shrines that much more enticing and rewarding. Plus, they can be used as fast travel points, which makes traversing the world a breeze. What I don't like about the shrines is that they all look the same. I know there's 120 of them, so having a different design for them all would have been asking a bit much. But it would have been nice if there were 4 or 5 different shrine interior designs, so every 30 or so shrines were different. Just then it's more interesting when you discover them, because who knows what it'll look like inside. Every time I enter a shrine, the layout of the room feels automatically generated by a computer. The puzzles obviously feel like they were made by a person, but the room I explore feels the exact same as the other 119 rooms I can explore.
Cool.
Here's the thing about weapon degradation. I think it's incredibly smart in this game. It forces you to use unconventional weapons against enemies and learn how to use your resources wisely. By the end of the game, since you had to use basically all the weapons in the game to defend yourself, you're a pro with the combat. That being said, I can't sit here and pretend the weapons breaking so quickly isn't annoying. I like the fact that they break. It forces the player to be creative and smart with combat, but I would have liked each weapon to be a bit more durable with a few extra hits. Easy target, so I won't linger on this sucker for that long. But yeah, the frame fights are great, just an epic feeling to them. Like I said with the weapon degradation, that factor forced me to master combat in the game. So flurry rushes and smart uses of my runes and weapons were abundant, and I didn't die once on the final boss. But that's not to say it was easy. After getting the last hit in, Zelda is free and asks Link if he remembered her. Post credits, the champions and King Roan's spirits are free, and if you recall all the memories, you get an extra cutscene showing Link and Zelda about to embark on reconstructing Hyrule. And then, you go back to the main menu, seeing that the last save point in the game was right before entering the final boss. The only thing you get for beating the final boss is a star on your profile. Here's why I hate this. For one, to me, it goes against one of the major things the game taught me. Everything affects everything, or at least a lot affects a lot. The game strives to give off a feeling of everything you do in this world matters and affects something as it would in real life. Shooting fire arrows at thorns, they burn. Pushing a boulder off a cliff, that thing is going to tumble down realistically and will also hurt enemies. Nighttime, enemies are asleep at their camp. Why wouldn't this continue with the ending? Why isn't Hyrule Castle ridden of Ganon's evil? I wanted to explore the castle without all the evil goop and enemies in it. Secondly, the game still has destroyed Ganon on the adventure log, as if you have yet to do it. Listen, I get it. A lot of Breath of the Wild's world is the way it is because of Calamity Ganon, and a lot of the characters talk about how Ganon is about to destroy the world. The way this game is set up makes it so you almost don't have to talk to anybody or free any divine beast or anything to beat Ganon. So doing these after beating the final boss makes a lot of the dialogue and cutscenes nonsensical. However, I don't think anybody would really care if they beat Ganon and play through the rest of the game with people talking as if Ganon is still a threat. I think nobody would actually play through the game and beat Ganon without doing a good chunk of the story bits. I always felt that the only people who were going to beat Ganon without touching any story details were speedrunners or people who already beat the game. But at the very least, the game could have thrown you something for beating the final boss, a piece of armor, weaponry, whatever. Just something to have because you faced evil in the eye and defeated Ganon rather than just a star on your profile. Without being able to see that Hyrule Castle is now free of evil or any kind of tangible reward, it just kind of felt empty after beating the final boss. But nothing compared to the worst of the worst when it comes to Breath of the Wild. I know, Zelda and Link aren't conventionally lovers. They were in Skyward Sword, but here Link is basically a knight who vows to protect Zelda. But man, I just wanted Zelda to hug Link or something at the end. She is so focused on being a vital part of Hyrule and to be more than just the princess. And in the memories, she's cold towards Link at first, but gradually warms up to him and eventually treats him as a great friend. I wanted a hug.
At the end of the day, Breath of the Wild is an amazing experience.
There we go.
One of the video games I've played in recent memory. At the very least, I'd probably rate it a 9 out of 10, and my official score would probably be higher than that. It's just that, like all games, it does have flaws. So if you have any problems with Breath of the Wild I didn't talk about here, be sure to let me know. And also, if you want to know exactly why I hate Breath of the Wild so much, be sure to email me at my brand new email, scotthatesbreathofthewild@gmail.com, and to also follow my new YouTube channel, Scott Hates Breath of the Wild, where we talk about any and all things about hating Breath of the Wild.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Hey, everybody. My name is Scott Hates Breath of the Wild, and I really hate Breath of the Wild. And you should hate Breath of the Wild, too, because this, not a good game. Please subscribe. I make mostly hourly content. Sometimes I get a little busy, so I might miss an hour here or there. But please subscribe. Please.